All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're thrilled to have Claudia San Pedro, the president of Sonic, here as our guest. So welcome, Claudia. Thank you for
Thank you
being
for
here.
having me, Donna. It's great to be here. And it's great to be, this is the first week of the new year. Lots of exciting things to look forward to. So
Yeah,
good to
getting a
be
great
here.
start here. Okay. All right, so for the introduction here, I hope everybody had a great holiday season. We're off to a good start. I know it was a rough couple of days, the last few days, and Claudia will be speaking about that in just a minute. We are in webinar format today, so please do introduce yourselves. Please introduce yourselves on chat so we get to know each other. The other thing I want to remind everybody is every fourth Friday of the month, we do a networking session. And this is a great opportunity to meet other businesswomen from across the country and some even around the world. I would like everybody to bring a friend and let's have a great conversation on the fourth Friday of the month this month. Let's see here. So Purse Power, just to remind everyone, Purse Power is working to help women use their massive purchasing power to drive positive change. Women make 80% of all purchasing decisions. If we would choose to buy from the companies that actively promote women, and we do that in mass, we could drive change in a hurry. So that's what we're trying to do with Purse Power. Let's see here. The purpose of the calls, these began when coronavirus started. And our intention is to really connect you with each other, connect you with resources, leading thinkers to help you through this time. So that's what we're trying to accomplish with the calls. And any special guests I have online, I know that Jennifer Grigsby is here today. She's one of our investors. We've got board members as well. So shout out to the special guests. Okay, again, share your comments via chat. We will ask questions later in the broadcast. So be capturing your questions as we go and we'll do a Q&A. So Claudia serves as the president of Sonic, America's Drive-In. And this is part of the family of brands, Inspire brands, including Arby's, Buffalo Wild Wings, Rusty Taco, and Jimmy John's. And Claudia, I don't know if
Dunkin' now.
Oh, Dunkin', really?
We
Okay.
just added Dunkin' to the family as well.
Oh, my kids are going to be happy about that. One works for Jimmy John's. So you got one of my kids as your employee. So Claudia assumed her role in January of 2018. She joined Sonic in 2006 as the Vice President of Investor Relations and as the Treasurer. Prior to joining Sonic, she served as the Director of the Oklahoma Office of State Finance, and she was appointed by Governor Brad Henry. She was also the first female and first Hispanic to serve as the Director of State Finance for Oklahoma. So congratulations, helping us progress here in the state. She has also served as the director of the Oklahoma State Senate Fiscal Staff and Staff Budget Analyst for the Senate Appropriations Subcommittees. And I think this exposure to government is going to be really valuable in our conversation this morning because she's got both sides of this. She has an undergraduate degree from Smith College in Massachusetts, a master's degree in business administration from the University of Oklahoma. She was born in Mexico City and she resides in Oklahoma City with her family. So that's Claudia. There we go. All right, let's get started. So our folks are always interested to learn about you and your background. So please tell us how you came to be the president of the 13th ranked quick service and fast casual restaurant chain in the nation. And give us a little bit about your backstory and your career and how you arrived here.
Of course. So a little bit about me. I always want to know about people's stories. And my story is I was born in Mexico. My parents came to the United States when I was 2 years old. We lived in Baltimore for a few years and then moved to Oklahoma City. My dad came to the States originally to study medicine for a brief time, was then offered the opportunity to do past his residency to pursue his specialty that he wanted to, which was cardiology here in Oklahoma. And that was to be a limited time. Then he ended up being offered the opportunity to stay and go into private practice with Dr. Stillman in Norman, Oklahoma, and be the first cardiologist in Norman. And my parents took that opportunity, and that's why we're all here today. And I have to say, I think it's important as we think about, and I know all of us think about this, it reflect what makes us who we are. Obviously, for me, being a first generation immigrant is an important part of my story, an important part of the perspective I have and share. And whether that's manifests itself through who I am as a person on a personal level or on a professional level, it's something that certainly I take with me everywhere I go. So I go to college, couldn't wait to get out of state, try something new, came back. And what's interesting, I think, about my story, and I'm going to use this as a theme, Donna, is when I came back, I had a liberal arts degree in economics. And I think liberal arts degrees are amazing because they really instill critical thinking, analytical thinking skill set, the skill set of being able to articulate yourself both orally and in a written format. So that skill set allows you then is a great foundation for further training and learning. When I came back to Oklahoma, what was interesting is I had an extremely tough time finding a job.
Oh, wow.
Because the philosophical mindset of many employers in Oklahoma was, and I thought economics was kind of close to business. So I was shocked when I encountered this resistance was, we don't really get it's a liberal arts degree. There's not much you can do with that. We want business, we want accounting, we want specific finance. And as I think about one of the key moments, as I think about my career, and as we think about all of our careers, it takes a village, it takes many people. And in my case specifically, it was people who, I think for the state, willing to say, I'm looking for great thinkers and we will train them in what we need to train them. And it's the fundamentals that are important. And so as I think about where I am today, it's people being able to say, and I'll remember this, my state Senate job, where I remember being nervous about the interview because I thought, I didn't major in politics, political science. I'm not up to date on all the intricacies of how a bill becomes law. And I remember the leadership at that time said, we want good thinkers. We will train you in all the specifics and the technicalities. We need to know that you're able to analyze a subject, that you're able to articulate and summarize and provide an objective analysis to Republicans and Democrats, and that you've got a commitment there. And I think I start that off because that was an incredible opportunity for me and a valuable lesson. So as you think back to where we are, I would tell you people who give you opportunities, right? And how important that is. And as we go through our lives, having people who've taken the time to mentor and coach along the way, I wouldn't be where I am today without that. Individually, what I would share with you is some tough lessons along the way from having some really good bosses and mentors who tell you the truth sometimes, and the truth hurts. And that's where I think as we look at our careers, we sometimes we need affirmation, we need validation, but we also need people to give us constructive criticism. And I can point out to a few times in my lifetime where I had either the person I reported to or a good mentor say, we're giving you this feedback and you're having a hard time taking it, but you need to listen and you need to be open and understand it's not meant as something to be critical to you personally, but this is meant to make you a better person, make you a better professional. And once I could reframe that and embrace that, then making the switch to really wanting feedback, understanding that it wasn't personal and that we were all here to solve problems and get the job done, that the 360-degree evaluations, the feedback we get, that has been, I have to say, a gift over the years and something that I think has helped me tremendously. Because when you can reframe it and come with the spirit of, let me set aside what I may personally believe or my feelings, what's at the root of this and how can I improve? The world opens up to you in new and different ways that we can imagine. I don't know if you've had those sorts of experiences, Donna.
Yes, I have. And of course, as an executive coach, I've helped people get that kind of feedback. I think you're so down to earth, and your point is really well taken. And setting your ego aside and really learning is key, right? No matter what level you're at.
Exactly. And we never stop learning, and to have the humility to be able to go at this with the right attitude. I think that commitment to self-development and learning, it takes a certain level of seasoned experience, professional maturity, but everyone has a boss. Everyone fundamentally usually wants to do the right thing. How do we all get together on the same page and make sure that we are all focused on that higher purpose. And I think, as you talk about how we get to those careers, I'd say the other thing I've had to learn a lot of is that has been helpful to me is saying yes. The opportunities that we may want are not the opportunities we get all the time. And being open to taking on new challenges, being open to taking on responsibilities that may feel very uncomfortable at the time, but seeing those as growth opportunities. And that means at times, and this is what I've had to do at times in my career, is, gosh, this feels like a lateral move. It doesn't feel like the conventional way that I thought I was going to grow my career, but really realizing that that lateral move, again, another opportunity for growth and learning that can get me to that next step, and being open to those. So saying yes to opportunities. And, I think you said you've got Jennifer Grigsby, and I know we've sat on a couple of things a long time ago, but part of that is putting aside the notion that you know how to do everything. And when someone comes to you with that opportunity, even if you don't know how to do it, you say yes and you figure it out, and have trust and confidence that you're going to have a team and mentors that are going to help you along with that. So I think that's a big part as I look back on my career, being able to say yes, and being grounded. And I would couple this saying yes with, and I learned this from a boss of mine, having some tough conversations of, do you know why you're here and what drives you and what your core values are? And this happened to me in my late 20s. And at that time, I was hearing things in my early 30s. I said, I can make more money. I can go do this. And it was really great to have this boss ground me and say, you're right. You can make more money. And so what you have to decide is what's important to you and what drives you and why you're here. And that's when I really took the opportunity to kind of ground myself. For me, and I say this for everyone, is for me, what I realized, the number one thing besides financial security and stability, I have to be able to pay the bills. I need to be able to provide for my family. But setting that basic need aside, it's, I have to believe I'm building something bigger and part of a higher purpose. I have to like the people I'm working with. It's important for me to know that the competition is on the outside, not in the building I'm working with. Collaborative, cultural working environments are critically important to my core values. And then the third part is, am I learning and am I adding value? That third puzzle piece. Once I was able to ground myself in that, it was easier to filter out if I had an opportunity. And was it all about the money? Because if it didn't meet these three criteria, the money didn't matter because I had financial security, right?
That is so important. Yeah, at the end of the day, you have to look yourself in the mirror and you've got to look back at your life and be happy with what you did. It's not all about the money, right?
Right. And I can share too, when interviewing people, that for some people, that individual competitive spirit within a cultural working environment is necessary, and people thrive on that. But you need to know where you thrive, what work environment you need to be able to grow and add value, and be clear on that.
Very good. Very good. Okay. I know that Case Lane came up with a question. I asked people to come up with questions for me before you got here.
Yes.
And she was interested in the fact that you've served in both government and in the private sector entities. With everything that's going on in the country right now, I think that you have a really valuable perspective to add. Could you talk about that, please?
Sure. One, I am so proud and so honored, and what an incredible privilege it was to serve our government at the state capitol for 13 years, and a unique perspective. People do not realize how incredible that, whether you work for state government, local government, federal government, I think a fundamental respect and appreciation. And certainly, as a result of working there, I learned so much about, when we say government, how our government works. But more importantly, I learned so much about how we as a society and community work together, live together to achieve ultimately, which again, from a first generation experience, making that American dream possible. And what was fascinating about going from the government sector to business sector is, in my particular case, working for Sonic, we were at that time 80% franchised, which means that 80% of our restaurants were owned by independent business people. What's important about that, and we were a public company, so I'm going to put those two aspects. So in the state capital, what's critically important is you've got constituencies and stakeholders. You have legislators that represent their constituencies from the community. In essence, they're their own little CEO that are serving their people. What was great, and I thought a lot of similarities, is when you go to a public company, and I should ground ourselves. So the state government, what we always used to say at the Senate with Governor Henry is, it's not our money. Let's be clear. This is not our money. This is taxpayers' money, and we have a responsibility to steward that. When you're in a public company, it's not your money. It's investors' money. It's franchisees' money. And again, we have a responsibility to understand what that means and what our fiduciary responsibility is in carrying that out. With that, then you understand, if those are my stakeholders, I need to understand and listen to them, make sure that as we build our vision and execute initiatives to grow our brand, our business, or the communities that we live in, the state and state government's case, am I listening, seeking to understand, putting together a vision that has listened to all of those things, understanding that people have certain decision rights, and then you execute against that, and you're all committed towards and aligned towards meeting that goal. So I think many more similarities than differences. I think as we think about today, what I always try to emphasize is every one of us has a tendency to want to make sweeping generalizations, whatever they may be. And my observation and my lament is that, and I was one of those people, before I worked for state government, it's so easy, right? Those government employees, what are they thinking? What are our leaders thinking? And then when you start to work there, what happens? You meet people like every one of us, good people, want to support their families, have a commitment to protecting, defending the state, the federal constitution, and making our country the greatest country it is. And once you realize that, I think it's important that we remind ourselves of that every day. So in the language we use, we stay away from sweeping generalizations, whether it's about workforces and employees, whether it's about, I'm a Democrat. I have great Republican friends, and we have great discussions and great debates who are smart, caring people. And we cannot forget that. And if we continue to use divisive language, we will not make the situation better. And I think that's one of the things that one of the learnings I took away from working in the state government too, was seeing Republicans and Democrats in really rigorous debate and discussion, but ultimately coming to a compromise and standing behind whatever they passed. This was the compromise we agreed to. We support it. We're aligned on it. There was give and take on both sides, and we live to have another great discussion and debate tomorrow, the next session. But we're all focused on making this a better place.
Gosh, that's so important right now. I mean, the country is so divided. And could you talk a little bit more about your thoughts around the cause of the division and what we can do to resolve the anger and get back together?
I'm going to bring it back to kind of leadership and what I said before. I think one of the things that we all have to accept responsibility for that's hard is in any organization, there are so many things I can control. So looking at the things that you can control, what we can hold ourselves accountable to, and how we become a part of the solution or problem. And when I think about that, Donna, I go back to the language we use, the way we engage with people, how do we make sure that if we expect respect, we give respect? If we expect to be listened to, that we truly seek to understand and listen to other people's perspectives, the most basic of things. And I think that we have forgotten that. And again, that if we want to move forward together, it's with a true mindset and heart to say we can agree and we can disagree and we can do it in a civilized, respectful way. What grounds us, I think, as Americans, is we live in the greatest country on earth. There should be no disputing that. And we are all committed to living and leading by the Constitution. And how do we, each of us, agree to do that with our words and with our actions every day?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very important point. Okay, let's talk about the transition. And by the way, some folks are asking about your D&I initiatives, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But Sonic was acquired by Inspire Brands in 2018. And what were some of the most important aspects of that transition? And if you had the opportunity to give yourself some advice back at the beginning, what would you have told yourself?
Lots of things to address there. So we were a public, so for those folks who don't know, we were an independent public company. We went through a sale process. And as part of that, as part of being a public company and your fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders, you put yourself up out there. It's a public process. And I say that to say, because you don't get to choose who your acquirer is. Your fiduciary responsibility is to maximize shareholder value, and the acquirer who does that is the acquirer. And what I said from the beginning when we were in that process, and then in the fall of 2018, is Sonic has seen as a brand incredible success through decades of great leadership by many people. And we have an incredible culture. You are always concerned when you go through an acquisition process of what will that acquirer's culture be? Are they going to be aligned with that next vision for driving the brand? And at the time that the acquisition happened, based on what we knew, I said, you don't get to pick your acquirer, but if I had to pick one, it would be Inspire, because they are the most closely aligned with our cultural core values. They are aligned with our franchisee interest to grow the brand and the business to the next level. And now having, December 2020 was celebrating our 2-year anniversary with Inspire. And what I would say is all of those things continue to be true. And I'm incredibly, continuously impressed with Paul Brown, our CEO, and our executive team members and the brand presidents of our family of brands, because they are committed to not just growing the brand, but doing it the right way and instilling a culture of mutual collaboration, partnership, as we go forward, being a good citizen in the community. And so making sure that we recognize and that we as leaders live that, and we do it again through words and actions behind that. And so I think it's been an incredible journey. I will tell you, it was incredibly difficult. We did see a reduction in force, as you see with all mergers and acquisitions, and those decisions were heartbreaking and were hard. I think at the end, what was my North Star was going back to grounding me in that higher purpose, which is we had an obligation to our franchisees, their drive-ins, their employees, to make sure that we are thinking about the future of the brand and that we're building it to sustain and thrive for decades to come. Because when you think about these franchisees, and I tell people this, look, this is my job. I'm passionate about it. But for our franchisees, this is their life's work. They have put their life's investment in this. Selling a drive-in is actually harder probably than finding a new job. And there needs to be a fundamental respect for that and to honor that piece.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. I worked for a company that had gone through a merger, and 4 years later, people were still talking about us and them. And I know that that's a dynamic that can sometimes happen. So are there some things that you did that you think are the right things to do to bring the two organizations together?
I'm so glad you said that,
Yeah.
Donna. We've been navigating through that this past year, and it's funny because as part of the integration, I would hear even in our leadership team, they'd say, "Well, it's the Inspire team or it's their team," and I'd say, "Guys, what are you saying? It's our team. It's our treasury team. It's our finance team. It's our supply chain team." And I think that's where the words, Donna, to your point. As you said, 4 years later, people were still seeing it that as leaders, how are we intentionally and thoughtfully leading that change in a positive and constructive way to build trust and confidence, collaboration, and also set out the guardrails of making sure that we are positive and saying, we are doing this for all the right reasons to build the brand. We do care about people. And here's how we're going to do it. There's a certain amount that's non-negotiable and not acceptable. But guys, we all want the same things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I know you brought someone in that helped you with the transition and they helped you with the change management. Can you talk a little bit about that? Some of the things that you did that helped you move forward?
Yes. Yeah. We had worked in our prior life with an incredible leadership developer, Janae Fromm. And shortly after we had announced the reorganization, the new organizational structure, we brought her in. And one of the things that I so appreciate about Janae is from my leadership style, I'm a firm believer in it's important we validate and acknowledge what we're feeling. It's important that we do that. And so let's not sugarcoat it. Let's embrace what we're feeling. It's also important to think and get the data and the facts to put that up, because there are often times when I may be feeling a certain way, but when I actually look at the information, it's not congruent or consistent. But what she does a great job of is acknowledging and validating that, but being very focused on how do you move on? What's your responsibility to yourself, to the organization you serve, to move forward in a positive and constructive way. And we had a few sessions with her, and she was extraordinarily helpful, because I think sometimes I call it getting stuck with the best of intentions to validate our feelings, we get stuck in them. And we don't come out and focus on how do we constructively become action oriented to actually affect change and growth.
Right. Absolutely. All right. So the other thing you and I talked about that I thought was really interesting is in this time, 2020, who would have predicted we would have gone through all the crises we did in 2020? The old ways of planning for the future and thinking about the future really haven't worked. And you've done something different instead as an organization. You've come to a different way.
We have, and it was by necessity. I won't say that we were smart enough to plan this ahead of time. But I would tell you, 2 months into the pandemic, one of the things that I realized, and I was hearing feedback from our teams, is we're emotionally exhausted, we're physically exhausted, we're having to work 24 hours a day because the rules are constantly changing and we're constantly having to adapt. And I'm a big scenario planner, like what's plan A, what's plan B, what's plan C. And the conclusion that we kind of came up with was, in this time, we really are going to we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how it's going to happen. So for us to come up with a scenario that would reasonably fall into a range of possibilities is not realistic. So how do we instead develop a framework for developing a tool set for what we're trying to execute against, that we can go to and say, as these things evolve, what does it impact, and what are the tools that we can develop that are flexible that we can bring out. And in our case, I'll give a specific example. When it first hit, I won't go into the fundamentals on the health and safety, but more from a promotional operation standpoint. What we were trying to figure out is we want to make sure we've got the right food at the drive-ins, and in normal times, running out of product is not okay. It is not acceptable for us. And during these times, there will be supply chain disruptions. There will be, and there's no way to guess. We can be as proactive as we can. We couldn't foresee what those might be. And so instead, coming up with, guys, it's going to happen, just accept that. So what can we do to prepare? And what are the things we can put in place to be able to shift quickly, provide consumer messaging that we may run out of product? What are the things that we can shift on, move into new product that we can have confidence in? So it was more focusing on adapting to the change as opposed to being focused on 100% of the time. Our operations goals are to get it out the door in under 4, make sure the order's accurate, and be friendly. If we were going to continue with those 3 priorities, we were totally stressing ourselves out. So what we had to do was reframe our mindset, redefine success, and reprioritize. So in that standpoint, we said friendliness is the most important thing right now. We need to make sure we're following CDC guidelines and make that human connection, because that's what we as a community need. And that friendliness allows us to do this. If we're handing out the order in 5 minutes or in 7 minutes, people are going to be more forgiving. So it was reprioritizing that and figuring out what we needed to do to bolster that piece up.
I think that's critical. And I'm really concerned as an HR leader, former HR leader, about people holding folks accountable for the performance goals that were set at the beginning of the year and not really taking into account everything people are facing, especially women with kids at home and the work that they're doing. And any thoughts on that? I mean, what employers need to be doing?
Absolutely. Actually, as an executive team, we had many conversations about that. And one of the things we had to reframe our mindset, redefine success, and reprioritize as leaders and as an executive team, we were really clear was, again, let's be crystal clear and reprioritize. What are the most important things we need to get done right now? To your point, Donna, a lot of the things that we set out to do at the beginning of 2020, set them aside, let them go. And as we reprioritize on that, one of the things that we prioritized was flexibility and grace. And so as we think about, as women caretakers, and we had single dads who are working in our primary caretakers, it's what do we absolutely have to get done and how flexible can we be? And changing that mindset to be, guys, for some of our people, they may not be able to get things done until 11 o'clock at night or 5 o'clock in the morning when their kids are sleeping. And so as managers, we have got to be as leaders more flexible to that. We need to be listening to our employees. We need to be caring for them in a way that in usual professional business times, we might not be.
I want to talk about that, about the best practices that you could share, so the things that you think you've done really well and ideas just to share with other people about how to be supportive. Go ahead.
I think one of those, and here's what I'm going to say, that sometimes we're not as explicit as we need to be. So you may say, well, of course you need to be flexible. We need to say it, we need to lead by it, and we need to be specific on what that looks like for everybody. And flexible, and I'll give an example for me, is I'm impatient. I want us to do all those 5 things. And so I have to take accountability and responsibility for saying, Claudia, it's not 5. What are your top 2? And asking if they can't get it done, why, and what can we do? I think that flexibility is being explicit. I'll tell you the other thing I think that we did well that I appreciate our CEO on this leadership. The evolution of women in the workforce, the ideal scenario, there are many ideal scenarios. One of those for me is, am I the only person that is going to be advocating for flexibility in the workplace? Am I the only person that recognizes and has to advocate that our parents are feeling real stress right now, and what are the things we need to do. And a credit to our executive team, primarily male, who it was a male at our executive team who said, we've got to be more understanding of the fact that our females in particular are dealing with some real daycare issues right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so what can we do to help them? One of the things that our CEO was very quick to do, after we kind of, again, it's slow, but in the big scheme of things, 2020 has been tough, is we have what we call a Young Achievers Academy. And I want to highlight this because I hope other businesses can look at doing this. And that is, we brought in tutors. We are paying for tutors that are available virtually to do either one-on-one or group tutoring virtually, or in our case, after the shelter-in-place restrictions were lifted, our offices, and we encourage everyone to work from home. Some of our folks can't work from home. They need to be in the office. So we've got a receptionist and security, but providing tutors on site, meeting all of the health and safety guidelines for parents who want to bring their children in and have some tutoring instruction so they can get a break and they can focus on work. That Young Achievers Academy, we're learning as we go along, but I think knowing that that is available, I think is a tremendous, if I think 20 years ago, businesses talking about something like that, but to be able to, in a time of a public health crisis, recognize that need for your workforce, offer it as a benefit, is tremendous. And I think it's an incredible show of the type of leadership that we have in our organization that didn't even, Paul was the one, we had our executive team members bring it up. And it was on my mind, certainly, but I was proud that as a female, I wasn't the one, that had to bring it up.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Really great. Okay. Let's see here. So I did have a couple more questions, guys, that people had submitted. So I want to ask those, and then you get ready to ask yours. So you probably have 4 or 5 generations working for Sonic right now, as you were mentioning, I think. How do you see the Z generation as different from the others? And then how do you keep everybody working together successfully as a team?
Well, so many differences, right? I'm going to go to going back to the theme, which is what am I doing and how am I changing my mindset and how am I committed to my own personal growth? And I will share this story. I was one of those people that complained about the millennial generation for a long time and made sweeping generalizations about it. Gosh, they don't want to work hard. They want to leave at 5. And once I reframe my mindset and embrace the fact that it's okay to be explicit and say, so one, be explicit about what your expectations and standards are and embrace that and don't view that as a negative. Just say, look, to be successful in this job, you're going to have to work more than 40 hours. You're going to have to stay after 5 at times. We need you to have a sense of urgency on things. And then also to embrace one of the things that as I changed that mindset and observed was one of the wonderful gifts the millennial generation gave us was the sense of risk and creative problem solving and desire to try new and different things quickly, right? That kind of this kind of entrepreneurial spirit. And I think I will share my generation a little more risk averse. We want to play things safe. And I loved that. And to be able to embrace it and to bring that and highlight that and to harness that and encourage that was a wonderful thing. So as we, to your point, like what the Z generation, working with all these different generations, again, being thoughtful and explicit about being clear on here are the business needs, here's what we're driving towards. These are things that are non-negotiable. We have to get the job done, right? It's not, can we open up today or not? We need to get the job done. how are we going to achieve that? And how do we bring out the best in everyone, celebrating the differences that we have, the strengths that we have, and complementing, seeking to find people who can complement us on our weaknesses.
Okay, very good. All right, one more question, guys, and then I want you to start putting them in the Q&A box, please. All right, so you are focused on your People First initiative. And again, we've had, I think it was Tanis asking about the kinds of diversity initiatives that you might have in the organization. Can you talk about that, your priorities and how you address it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we just launched a People First initiative that is a combination of programs that we already had in place, new programs that we're starting, and really focusing, and this is what I would share with you as we think about that. When we think about anything, and this is the foundational level, and again, I want to say one of the things I greatly admire and respect about Paul Brown is his commitment and his passion for fostering, we say this, foster a winning culture, is that cultural piece in a meaningful and substantive way. But in all of these initiatives, it's ultimately the sign of success is cultural. Are we doing it when no one's watching? Are we doing it with a positive and constructive mindset? Is one of those, I think, key critical foundational parts. The other ones are, what are the programs we have in place? What are the policies we have in place to practice and to make sure we affect that? So I'm going to give a few examples. So on the People First initiative, what's exciting is we have 4 major pillars. And the first one is as we recruit people. So in our recruiting practices, what are the policies and programs we have in place to ensure that we are taking a broad-based approach to look at, as we seek to attract the best talent, looking everywhere. And those come in formal ways, and I'll give you formal ways such as, we talk about the fact that when we are hiring for someone, an interview for someone, we should have a female candidate and a person of color candidate. Now, one story you can tell yourself is, oh, that's just a check the box program and policy. But the other way to look at that is, no, that's a way to hold ourselves accountable. And if you have the right cultural mindset, and this is where that culture piece comes in, it's not about just saying check the box. It's about, if I'm not finding these candidates, then I'm not looking in all of the places I should be looking to. And it's identifying where we need to bolster those gaps. So that's kind of the policy and the program perspective. Second pillar is job growth, because if we think about ultimately I&D initiatives, it's about inclusivity, most important, respect. Does every person of our team feel like they belong and that we respect and value who they are as an individual and their background and their diversity of perspective and thought? It's that piece, right? But the other piece is, how does that manifest itself? How do I know that I'm valued and respected? And one of those important points is that I have career growth opportunities, right? It's not enough to say it. It's not enough to go through an unconscious bias training. And so that second pillar is really designed to say, are we, and the restaurant industry is a prime example of this, moving people up and giving true opportunities for true economic success at every level? And one of the examples we use there is when we look at demographically our population in the restaurant industry, and I'll credit this with Paul Brown too. He talks about this, and we face the same challenge. More than half of our general managers in our restaurants across our brands are female.
Fantastic.
They're female. Wonderful. But as they get higher in the ladder, we lose them. And so it's not enough to know that. Okay, we see that statistic. In this case, it's taking the time to have focus groups and listen. And one of the things, we hear from females is, look, if I have to travel, if I have to support a family, it just becomes harder. And the ability for us to listen to that, to seek to understand, and really start to fashion out, okay, as we think about those barriers, are there things that we can do we can work around them, that we can pay attention to, From a person of color standpoint and a female perspective, the other thing we talk about in terms of career growth is, are we telling people we believe in them? Are we giving them the opportunity to grow? Are we taking the time to go to our young people and say, I think that you could be a manager? And if they don't apply for the position, as opposed to just saying, well, they didn't apply for the position, going to smart, bright people and saying, we think you have the potential to do bigger and greater things. How can we help develop you from that perspective? So that's the second pillar. The third pillar is career growth within the support center structure, traditionally known as the corporate structure. And then the fourth pillar is being a good citizen. Throughout those pillars, the foundation of unconscious bias training, business resource groups. As we look at every level of our organization, what do we look like? What are we talking about? Are we truly creating an inclusive culture, and a culture where people feel like they not only belong, but that they can grow their careers here?
And it's so important that the top leader believe in that and walk the talk, right? How do you hold people accountable? Because that's the other piece. People can say things, but how do you make sure it actually happens? And guys, please do start putting your questions in the Q&A box. Go ahead.
I think it's a combination of both constantly checking on those numbers and empowering each of us to ask those questions. And I'll give you an example, because during these times, and this holds throughout, right? The tendency for all of us, whatever's going on, is to say, well, they should be doing this. Well, those leaders should be doing this. What I try to do is tell our folks, what are we doing? Because and I'll give an example, for our VPs, if you're looking to the executive team, we're like 10 people. You guys are 50 people who have teams and who have a high influence authority. What are you doing to make sure, and what are we doing to make sure that we're holding each other accountable to that? And I think a part of that is, as an example, and we talk about this, as we think about our D&I initiative, when we have our talent review process, asking each other those tough questions. Are you really looking at everyone's potential? Are you only putting this person as a high potential because they've expressed an interest? Because I can personally share, if it weren't for the fact throughout my lifetime, at certain points where leaders said to me, Claudia, have you thought about doing this? Because I think you'd be really good. I might not have considered it at all.
Okay, so someone's asking, Bev Wood's asking you to share more about your talent review process.
Yes, so our talent review process that we have is kind of two main components to it. The first component is, as we go through our talent review processes, I'm sure many of you are familiar, if you're not, with the 9-box process.
Talk that through quickly, will you? Go ahead.
So in that 9-box process, it's a matrix of what's the potential for growth for a person and what's their actual performance. So if their potential for growth is high and they're also a high performer in that top 9 box, are they ready for promotions? What are the things that we need to be doing to retain and challenge this person, and letting them know that there are opportunities for growth? If they are in a low performance and mid potential box, is it that we haven't set them up for success? We put them in a job that doesn't showcase their skill set? Let's have that conversation with them. One of the talent review processes that I think is great is when, this is the hard part, Donna, is when Claudia goes up there and puts her team up there, I have to be open to Donna being able to challenge me and say, Claudia, I know you think so-and-so is a high performer and has high potential, but I have to tell you, my experience has not been positive or constructive. And I have to be willing to set aside the protective nature of how I feel about my team and be willing to listen to that and be respectful of that. That's the beauty of the talent review process, because afterwards I can then give really good feedback, because in certain situations we found is, I'm going to insert name, Tom, you do a great job with this team and everyone has a high degree of respect, but you're not offering good customer service to the other departments. And if you don't do that, you're not fulfilling your job duties. It's not enough to keep your team happy. You've got to make sure part of your job is to make sure you're serving the other departments and that you're being collaborative with them.
Mm-hmm. So Bev is an HR person, I am too, so we understand the 9-box grid, but part of it is also, I think the tough conversation is when somebody has reached their highest potential, they're a high performer, I mean, at what they do, but they're not able to move any further in the organization. That's a rough one too.
That is a rough one. And I think this is where, and this is a theme we are seeing now, right? The hardest part of all of our jobs is, as individuals, being willing to take truthful feedback as much as it hurts, and it's not what we want to hear. Mm. The other biggest challenge for us is giving that feedback and being able to say, Donna, and I'm sure you've been in that situation, I've been in that situation. I know that you want to be a vice president, but that opportunity is not before us. Mm-hmm. And it may happen, but I can tell you right now, it's not going to happen. And and this is where, again, throughout all of our careers, I've had to say this, you have to make a fundamental decision for you. If that is so important to you for your career growth and as a personal goal, and if it's not going to happen here, you may need to make a fundamental decision that this may not be the place for you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I've lost Jean Kelly's question, but Jean Kelly's one of our investors, and she's an icon for our state. She was very interested in wondering how she could get a hold of you, and if there's some way to interact with you. I think everybody would probably like to know.
Absolutely. My email is csanpedro@inspirebrands.com. And I feel bad because I'm looking at the time and I've talked a lot, which is, most people who know me know I do.
It's all good. That's what we're here for. Okay, any final questions, guys? And then I'll ask her to do her summary. Anything else you'd like to ask? I'll give you a second. Okay. Well, I normally like to ask at the end here, what would you like the people attending the call today to have learned from you? What are the most important learnings you want them to have had?
I think it's, on the one hand, going back to the basics, and what I said, and everything, right, that we're going through, whether it's individually or our roles as professionals or as citizens, is what do I expect, and how do my words and actions reflect what I expect? The other piece I would leave with you, because I just think this was a big one for 2020. And I will share with you on the Inspire integration. One of the things that I really appreciated as I learned working with my new colleagues is grace. And I think one of the takeaways I would like for all of us to have is it is hard for us as leaders to admit we make mistakes, but there cannot be growth, there cannot be learning without making mistakes. And so recognizing that as much as we try and we want to use the right words at times, we mess up. And how do we as individuals and as leaders model the behavior by admitting when we make mistakes, having the courage to ask for forgiveness? On the other side, how do we lead by example and have the courage to grant forgiveness? Because I think that's something that's been missing as well. Is there are some things that are absolutely unacceptable and we hold ourselves to a higher standard. But there are many areas where if we're not willing to engage in tough conversations and come at it with the right mindset, that it's going to be hard and hurtful at times, but having the courage to admit mistakes, ask for forgiveness, and grant that forgiveness. I think that in the future, we're going to continue to get what we get and not, we've got to be able as individuals to model that behavior on every level. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. Well, in our society as well, beyond our companies. Okay.
Yeah.
Other actions you want people to take coming out of this conversation?
Here, I'm going to say a few things, and I'm going to go back to this, Grace, is it's important we all ask ourselves tough questions, but it's important that we do it with the intent to be constructive and to achieve solutions. So I think that every person on this call is a leader and has incredible influence in your community, on your business teams, with your colleagues. So as we look at how we go forward, how do we begin to, and I don't have all the answers, but how do we begin to model that behavior in small ways so that we can make a larger impact over time?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. It begins with us, doesn't it? Okay. All right. Any other final words of wisdom?
I don't know about final words of wisdom. I do say, and I'm open, closing these things out with, for all of us to take a special moment to thank people who have helped us and supported us along the way. I have to say this because as a former state government employee, and my brother served in the special forces and military, again, going back to the basics, let's make sure we respect and honor our elected officials who are doing the right thing in extraordinary circumstances, and our workers, our state government, federal government employees, law enforcement, making sure that we honor and respect them. Ask critical questions. We need to do better, but let's not lose that fundamental respect and dignity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So I'm getting great comments here. People admire your confident vulnerability, your leadership, very timely, inspirational message. You can see all the congratulations. So really, thank you so much for being here. You've been amazing. Appreciate your time. And your,
well, thank you, Dawn. I was sharing. I wish we could have more conversations. We're all so busy, but thank you very much for having me. And it's been wonderful to at least see you all out there virtually. I wish I could see your faces. One of the hard things for me about COVID has been that human interaction. And so Zoom has been important, and seeing people on screen has been important for my mental health.
Yes, me too. All right. So thank you again. We've got about 3 minutes left here. So I appreciate you being here. Upcoming guests on the program, just so you know, we've got Crystal Oakes with Oakes Creative starting on January 15th. And I asked you guys to nominate people to be our speakers. So we've got national speakers like Claudia. And then we also want to interject a few more local people or some of the business leaders. So Crystal will be our first one. We've got a panel on women in technology on January 22nd. And on January 29th, we are having a networking meeting. And again, we really want those to be great interactive conversations. Please bring your friends, because you're not going to get access to these people. To your point about Zoom, we're providing a venue for you to meet new people across the United States. We'd love for you to bring your friends. Francine Sears, the CEO of Women in Business, she does the bags for Dell Computers, and she's a very, very senior business leader. Will be here on February 5th. And then on February 12th, we've got Elizabeth Hutt Pollard. She is the Secretary for Science and Innovation, a board member. She's on the board of the Young Presidents Organization, so she's incredible, and she'll be here in February. Please sign up for a directory listing if you haven't done that already at pursepower.com. Download our Google Chrome extension so that you can find and buy from women-owned and women-led businesses when you're shopping online. Please do use your directory to buy from women-owned and women-led businesses. We want to support each other. That's what this is all about. And please do like and share our social media pages. We need to grow this audience. This is a tremendous program. We've got really high quality stuff. If you go to the Purse Power site and look at Let's Share the Journey, you can see our prior speakers. It's amazing who we've had on the program. And then please, again, do let your friends know about this webcast every Friday at 10. Okay, one last thing. Thank you so much. Again, Claudia, any other final words?
No, thank you, Donna. And again, thank you so much for having me. I think it's a great way to open up the year. I'm going to be very positive and optimistic that we will overcome any challenge we have. We are a great country. We are a great community of people. And it's just, continue to nurture ourselves so we can build resiliency and live to fight every day so that we can continue to be better citizens, better people, and better leaders.
Yes. Let's hope 2021 is a better year on every front. All right. One last comment, guys. Of course, Purse Power, we have it. Let's use it. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.